Haha, I knew I'd get you with that title. What's this all about? Well, fortunately or unfortunately, probably not what you think. You know, it's a catchy title and I did that on purpose, but here's what this video is really all about. Look, all kidding aside, what's it like for adults who suffer with trichotillomania versus kids or teens? Are there differences? Are there major differences? I mean, both pull their hair and likely both feel it's something that's very much out of their control. And how about in terms of working with adults versus working with younger clients? I mean, some of these folks may have been struggling with trich for 10, 20, 30 years or longer. Are kids easier to work with than adults, or vice versa? Do adults have advantages in trying to overcome this stuff that younger clients don't have, or vice versa? That's what we're going to talk about today. Stay tuned. So how about this question? When we work with adults versus young people, is there a difference in our approach? Do we have to handle things differently depending on who we're working with? Well, the answer to that question is yes and no. Yes, in that it's often harder just to get adults in the door here for us to be able to work with them in the first place. Why would that be? Well, I think it's really because the longer one has suffered with trichotillomania and the longer one has struggled with it, eventually, I guess it'd be only human nature to give up on the thing, you know, just sort of resign yourself to maybe having to live with this, or maybe live in spite of it for the rest of your life. And you know, so many adult sufferers of trichotillomania have really lost faith, mostly in themselves. They've come to doubt even their ability to recover from trich, even with the best possible treatment. And that's such a shame because invariably, anybody's inability to break free from trich, honestly, has far less to do with their own individual limitations than it does the limitations of the treatment or the coaching method or maybe the professional they're working with. So those of you who are adults and who are watching this video, I want to encourage you to consider that in all likelihood, you are not the problem. It's not because of any inherent limitations you have that you're still suffering with trich. You just haven't come across the right treatment or coaching method that's been right for you as an individual. And yet, just because that hasn't happened yet, that doesn't mean you couldn't somehow, run into something that works for you tomorrow. There's an old saying, the past does not equal the future. You ever heard that? What does that mean? It means that no matter what did or did not work for you yesterday or last week or last year or 10 or 20, 30 years ago, none of that has anything to do with what happens or can happen or what's possible for you today. It's not how long you've been suffering with trichotillomania or even everything you've already tried to beat it, maybe without success, that determines what you're capable of today. All that matters today is, what do you do differently starting today that you didn't do before, and that could make all the difference for you now. So now let's go back to the question we asked at the beginning of this video. Is there really anything different about working with adults versus working with younger clients, which we also do a lot of? Well, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, often the hardest part of anything we'll ever do together is just getting them in here so we can help them. And that's for all the reasons we talked about earlier. Convincing an adult client to take a chance, to take a risk on something that they're really worried may not work. And then, honestly, the major worry around that is that they'll end up wasting their money. And if you have no faith in yourself to begin with, and especially if money's tight, that often ends up being the determining factor as to whether or not this adult chooses to go for it with us or not. But let's suppose we can get over that. If an adult does choose to go to work with us, then no, there's really nothing different in our approach. Generally speaking, we would work with an adult, even one that's been pulling for many, many, many years, the same way we would with a younger person. And that's simply because, again, generally speaking, the mental blocks that stop a person from experiencing a sense of choice in the matter of whether or not they pull, and by the way, that mental block is usually a belief called, I can't help it, that's usually the major block to healing for anybody with trichotillomania, regardless of age. And that's why the very first thing we ever do, we're talking day 1 of 90. Now, most of our individual programs here at the TRS are 90 days in length. Regardless of the age of our client, the very first thing we'll ever do together is we show our clients where the control button has been hiding all this time. That's right. And if you suffer with trichotillomania and you're watching this, I don't care how old you are, the fact is you have a control button too. And of course, this is a metaphor, but we're talking about a mental strategy. an ability that you do turn on, and usually in very specific situations, and probably something you've been doing for years without even realizing it, that makes it easy and effortless for you to not pull, even in situations where normally you'd be believing you can't help it. So for those of you who've been feeling like a slave to a condition that controls you, how would you like to learn where that control button has been hiding for you all this time? Now, you can imagine that discovering this would be just as important for a young person as it would be for an adult who's been pulling for years. I mean, once you learn to exercise voluntary control over your pulling activity, does it really matter how long you didn't know how to do that in the past? Of course not. All that matters is, what do you do differently starting right now? Okay, now here's the other thing. Both adults and young people tend to pull their hair, or have gotten into the habit of doing that for the same reasons. Invariably, that's to try to quell an otherwise uncomfortable feeling, usually emotions. So stress, pressure, overwhelm, anger, hurt, frustration, even boredom or monotony, oftentimes no stress there, but still uncomfortable. People who pull their hair, the reason they do that is as a kind of a stress coping mechanism. The same way other people who may never have heard of hair pulling might reach for a cigarette or a drink or drugs or food or whatever it might be for the individual. It's all about finding some way, any way at all, to feel better when you really need it. And of course, there's nothing really wrong with trying to feel better if you're feeling badly. That's human nature. It's human instinct to try to avoid pain. We just don't like how you've been doing that, right? But see, here's the thing. We know you're not calling us for help because hair pulling really works so great to help you feel so much better. You're calling us because you're hurting and you want relief. So whether it's an older adult who's been pulling for many years or a younger client who may have just started pulling a year or two ago, what if we could identify ways for you to really feel better? Ways that last and that reduce your stress, not increase it, and that, by the way, also preserve your hair. Well, guess what? Less stress means less pulling. Do you see how this works? And you see, this is just as important an issue to address for a young person as it is for an older adult who may have been pulling for years. Bottom line is, in many ways, our approach with young people and adults really is very similar, and it's proven just as effective and just as remarkably successful in both groups. So there you have it. If you're an adult who's been pulling for many years, again, remember, the past does not equal the future. Whatever you've tried in the past that didn't work, that wasn't because of you. It's because the way or ways you've tried to stop in the past wasn't really right for you. And that's no one's fault. And that's why whatever you tried in the past that didn't work has nothing at all to do with what can change for you, even in an instant, once you start doing things differently today. So if you're an adult who's been really down on yourself because you're still pulling, all these years later, it's time to free yourself from the pessimism about what's possible for you in the future. There's just no need for it. If anything, it would only stop you from making that call for the help that, frankly, it's about time you got. I hope you found this video helpful. What do you think? Go ahead and hit the reply button below and leave us a comment. Talk to us. How did this video impact you? If you're watching this video through our Facebook community page, do feel free to like and share it. If you're watching this video at our YouTube channel or at our sister blog site, feel free to leave your comments and questions there. In fact, if you have questions about trichotillomania or hair pulling and you're just really not sure where to go for answers, feel free to visit our website's questions and answers page at trich-free.com/qa.html. And if you'd like to contact us to get some information about how we can help you or a loved one, please feel free to visit our website at www.trich-free.com or to call us at any time of day or night toll-free at 833-Trich-Free. Thanks again for watching. I'm Robert Mantell with the Trichotillomania Relief Specialists. Here's wishing you an amazing Trich-Free week.